All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for waking up early and joining us. My name's Luann Greenwald. I'm the director at the Hilliard Art Museum. And many of you, of course, were with us at the night to honor Roger Ogden last night. Thank you for being with us. And we're delighted to continue that celebration this morning. I want to say a special thanks to Larry Marino and Oates and Marino for sponsoring today's event. Larry's with us this morning. Thank you, Larry. We're also grateful to our 2023 media sponsor, the Times-Picayune The Advocate, and to Acadiana Open Channel that is recording this morning's session, and they will broadcast it to make it available to a broader audience. So this morning, you'll hear a presentation by Curator Bradley Sumrall from the Ogden Museum of Southern Art, which is celebrating its 20-year anniversary this year. And that will be followed by a conversation with our Hilliard Art Museum curator, Ben Hickey, in conversation with our 2023 Gala honoree, Roger Ogden. And we'll have a 15-minute intermission in between so that you can enjoy coffee in the lobby. But before we start the program, I'd like to invite William Andrews, our partner in this project and director of the Ogden Museum of Art, to say a few words, and he'll introduce his curator, Bradley. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Luann. Last night was so much fun, celebrating Roger and the collection and the exhibition at the Hilliard, and absolutely thrilled that the museum and the university are so supportive of this entire endeavor, and we are all grateful at Ogden Museum of Southern Art, the trustees, the staff, everyone involved to be collaborating on this. The exhibition is beautiful, incredibly well done. Ben, Bradley, it was absolutely lovely, so we are absolutely grateful. I do want to thank your Hilliard Museum staff. You've all been lovely and fantastic to work with. Luann, thank you so much for keeping up with us as Ogden Museum also opens a major exhibition with the Ogden Museum Permanent Collection that Bradley will be speaking about, and allowing us to come enjoy your celebration. That was a fantastic tribute last night, and I think what I wanted to say before I introduce Bradley is very quickly, as I was listening to all the wonderful speakers in tribute last night to Roger and his collection, I wanted to talk just a little bit from my perspective from, I don't want to say it, but 34 years ago. Wow. The definition of a genre, the definition of a field of scholarship, and really the definition of an entire concept, I think really started with Roger's passion for creating this collection. And I came into contact with Roger and Ken and the collection sometime in the early 90s. I want to say it was like 1991 or 92. I had graduated from a little university in Mississippi that had a gallery program with really substantial exhibitions, and a leader in the art history program, Dr. Paul Grutkirk, who had been teaching at Tulane but went to this university, which is Mississippi State University, and he wanted to show, I think, the first or one of the first public exhibitions of the Roger Houston Ogden collection. And I had just graduated with a degree in painting. And so I was completely unemployed. I was painting, I think, or trying to paint, and Dr. Grutkirk asked me if I would like to be involved with this. And I had always been passionate about the place where art and people meet. I didn't know much about it, but I said I would do it. And he said, well, there's one thing, here's some material about it, and I want you to write something, because I did pass Dr. Grutkirk's classes. He was notoriously difficult, and he was the professor that would literally take your paper if it was 5 minutes late, put it into the trash can next to his podium and say, I will see you next semester. Because if you didn't pass the paper, it was 60% of the entire semester. That never happened to me. I still kept my papers that were A's because they were impossible to get. So I wrote something for Dr. Grutkirk about this genre, which didn't exist, and that was my whole thesis, that this was a pioneering opportunity for the museum at the university and to show this collection. And I didn't know most of what I was talking about, but I knew what I had seen, and it looked really good. So we opened that exhibition. And I remember Roger tells a story better than I do about I was sitting on the floor writing copy, cutting labels, all the stuff I had never done before to get this exhibition going. But back then, believe it or not, there was no internet. So we got this exhibition up and people would come in and every day they asked questions. And because I was unemployed, they asked me to stay there, like from 10 to 5 every day. And I said, sure, I'll draw in my sketchbook. Well, it was a very popular exhibition. People came in all the time and they would ask questions and I would say, I don't know. I have to go find that out. So every day I would leave with these questions and I'd go to the library. There was an architecture library in the College of Architecture, Art and Design, and there was a main library. And there weren't any books on Southern art. It was really phenomenal. There were books on Southern history and books on Southern architecture and books on Southern culture. But at the time, there really wasn't a heavy book about Southern art. There was some inclusion, but that was my first glimpse that this was a field, this was a genre. And when I had written to Dr. Grootkirk and continued to write about it, I began to think of it as the undiscovered country in the history of American art. Because if you were a college student in art history or in studio art, the minute you left, you wanted to make that pilgrimage or Mecca to either, if you weren't going to go to Europe, you wanted to go to New York, you wanted to go to Los Angeles, or you wanted to go to a city that would then take you to New York or Los Angeles or something like that. But this was so powerful because it was already there, and it was ours, and it was us, and it made so much sense to be looking at this. So it really defined a field, this core collection, as you know. And it went from creating scholarship and research, of which I will introduce an expert in just a minute, someone whose career has also been defined by this amazing passion in this undiscovered territory, to where now we have a museum full of educational programs specifically about art of the American South in really a short amount of time. Because the art world, museums, they move glacially. And so to have something become more than a movement and become a field of study, there's university programs devoted major resource to this now. Thankfully, this is one of them with this exhibition in this museum. And I thank Dr. Henderson and Dr. Savoie for being so supportive of this whole concept. So that collection really opened my eyes, and eventually we got the internet, and eventually the Delahanty book, the Roger Ogden collection book, and then you started seeing articles in magazines, and you started seeing, art galleries and art dealers who had been collecting work and helping to define it as well, to be sure, but really create something special. And every time I'm so fortunate to have museum directors come visit Ogden Museum, they always say, you are so unique. You have a great mission because you can go to any city and see collections, world collections, encyclopedic collections, but I have to come here, and I want to come here to see art of the American South. So we are absolutely so grateful to be pairing with you. I was supposed to speak more about the 20th anniversary of Ogden Museum, which is this year, and a short 20 years in the blink of an eye. And this really incredible exhibition curated by Bradley Sumrall called Knowing Who We Are. And it is a look in the rearview mirror and through the front windshield at the same time. The museum was born in 2003 with an exhibition, Story of the South, and it told a moment in time looking a little bit to the past and thinking about the future, but an absolute moment in time where the last 20 years, and certainly in the last decade, with Bradley's scholarship and intuition and the way that he has approached the synthesis of art and history and culture with a lot of literature, as you'll hear. It has really created a much greater appreciation and understanding of what we refer to as a sense of place in the work that we do. So this is a great pleasure for me to introduce Bradley Sumrall, curator of Knowing Who We Are, and also, I would say, a fellow Mississippian, like I am, a native from the great neighborhood of Mississippi, who lives in the Faubourg Treme now in New Orleans for many years, and has curated more than 70 exhibitions. That's probably severely outdated, and has also been a juror for many exhibitions, and written many books, monographic and survey and catalog-oriented books. One I really would love to mention, Clementine Hunter a sketchbook, which was graciously presented by Wyatt and Becky Collins with the exhibition at Ogden Museum. A beautiful pioneering moment, again, to catalog the history and moment of one of our most important artists. And I will say the whole drum will sound. Women in Southern Abstraction was a key moment for Ogden Museum. Michael Mead's Bent Not Broken, another exhibition that Bradley curated. The Created World of Enrique Alvarez, and then very recently, and with great impact, the first major retrospective and monographic publication for Dusty Bonget, and it was called Piercing the Inner Wall, The Art of Dusty Bonget. So really defining moments that carry on and continue. So thank you so much for that, everyone. We are so grateful to be here. Join me in welcoming Bradley Sumrall.
Thank you. Thank you. You can hear me? Yeah, great. Well, it's an honor to be here in Lafayette. Man, what a wonderful city this is, and I wish I had more time to spend in it. I was looking online at the hotels that were offered to us, and I said, let me look at Airbnb, and I hit the gold mine. I'm staying in Francis Pavi's studio in Freetown. I wish I had more time to really relax. It's such a fabulous place, and all the art history here is so rich. And to be in Elmore Morgan's hometown, to be staying in his student's studio, Francis Pavi, and to see so many old friends here outside of the city of New Orleans is really a special moment. And of course, we're all here to honor one man's vision, and that's our namesake at the Ogden Museum of Southern Art, Roger Houston Ogden. So what I thought I'd do a little today is, we talked a lot about who Roger was last night and the importance he is to the state of Louisiana. And I'm going to cover a little of that ground this morning, but I'm going to go through that pretty quickly because I think it was all covered last night. And we'll get to the matter at hand, which is the collection and Roger as the collector. This is not the right slide? I'm not at the right presentation? How do I do this, Ben? Help. Yeah, there we go. So I put together a little presentation called One Man's Vision. Roger Houston Ogden was born in Denver, believe it or not. Denver, Colorado, but quickly after his birth, his family moved to Shreveport, Louisiana. And yes, he is a descendant of Sam Houston, if anybody was wondering. And within a few years of relocating to Shreveport, they moved to Lafayette, where we are today, which is his boyhood home. And I can tell you, I've never seen a hometown welcome a native son like they did last night. It was very moving. Roger graduated from Lafayette High School in 1964. Here we have a depiction of Roger's boyhood home by artist Ben Looney. This is in the Ogden Museum of Southern Art's permanent collection. And it was commissioned, I believe, by Roger's father, is that correct, in 1955. So Roger was just a small boy, and although his family weren't exactly art people at this time, there was obviously art in his life. Roger left Lafayette to go to LSU, where he graduated second in his class from the College of Business and was elected student body president. And from there, he went to Tulane University, where he holds a Juris Doctorate degree, and graduated in the Order of the Coif. And I believe, if my facts are straight, that puts him in the top 10% of his class at Tulane. And while he was at Tulane, he was also elected to the Law Review. So I think it was very clear to everyone around Roger at a very early age that this is a man that was driven and focused and destined for excellence in his life. A little bit about his career. After a brief career as a litigator, Roger Ogden turned his focus to real estate. And over his career, he's led the development of over $2 billion in commercial real estate. The first of those real estate ventures were right here in Lafayette, but eventually he turned his eyes toward downtown New Orleans, and you would not recognize the city of New Orleans were it not for Roger's work in it. The Lowe's Hotel is just one of the many ventures that he was involved in. As a civic leader, Roger firmly believes in giving back and leaving this world, as we talked much last night, a better place than he found it. And as a civic leader, Roger currently serves on the New Orleans Aviation Board, where he helped in the redesign and in the design and construction of the new Louisiana airport, and it's gorgeous, as you can see right there, with a beautiful Don Dudot right in the center of this room. Sorry, my notes are all over the place. But in 2014, he funded the endowment of the LSU Roger Hadfield Honors College. He serves on more boards than seems humanly possible, including GNO Inc., the Business Council of New Orleans, the Bio District New Orleans, and the Committee of 100. He currently serves on the board of the Ogden Museum of Southern Art as well, and has served on boards of the Contemporary Arts Center New Orleans Museum of Art, the New Orleans Ballet, the LA State Museum, the LSU Museum of Art, the New Orleans Center for the Creative Arts, and the Louisiana Governor's Mansion Foundation. And works from his collection, historic works from his Louisiana collection, currently hang on the walls of the Governor's Mansion. I know because I hung most of them. And I can tell you that the Governor's Mansion has never looked better than when graced with the works from Roger's collection right now. But the list goes on, and to say that he's affected New Orleans, I mean, the House of Blues probably wouldn't be in New Orleans if it weren't for Roger Houston Ogden. The Aquarium of the Americans, the Louisiana Supreme Court building redesign. His impact on the civic life and on the commercial life of Louisiana cannot be understated. But he's also a family man and a sportsman, and I'm not a big sports guy, but it seems like every story that when I talk to someone who knows Roger, it all starts around a sporting event. I was speaking with Arthur Roger, one of the great gallerists in New Orleans, just the other night. I said, well, how did you get to know Roger? And he was like, well, we were on a volleyball team on Magazine Street. And that's with so many people. And if you've been around Roger at all, you understand his love of college football, especially his love of LSU college football. But one of the things we do share is a passion for fishing, and I know he spends every summer on his ranch in Montana fly fishing. And I've even given tours of the museum to his fishing guides from Montana who were down visiting New Orleans. And he's a family man. He and Ken are a beautiful family, and Ann and Field Ogden, his son, his wife Michelle, and their 4 children. If you're lucky enough to get on Roger's Christmas card list, you can learn all about them every year. It's pretty fabulous. But that's not why we're here today. We're here to talk about Roger Houston Ogden, the collector. And Ben put together a beautiful survey of Roger's collection in the space allowed. I think to really even begin to tell the story, you'd have to have the Ogden and the Hilliard combined to fully tell the story of Roger's collection. But it all started here with this Drisdale piece. Roger was in college at LSU, and a girlfriend talked him into going to an art gallery. And if I'm getting the story correct, I've heard this story a few times, and I always hear something new about it, but if I'm getting the story correct, there was a talk at the gallery, and Roger was bored to tears and started pacing around the gallery looking at art when all of a sudden he came across this Alexander John Drisdale. And it reminded him of his boyhood home. Think back to that Looney painting, watercolor, and the landscape of his boyhood home. And to quote Roger, it just struck me. It was like a magnet. It conveyed a sense of place. And that sense of place and that love of this piece lit a fire in that young man. So he went back to his dorm room, and he was trying to figure out how he was going to get it. It was $500. He didn't have $500. And so eventually it was around his mother's birthday, and he thought, well, she would love it too, and this would be a great gift from our mother. So he went to his father and said, Dad, I've got an idea. Let me take you, show you what I think we should get her. And they pull into the parking lot of a gallery in Baton Rouge, and his father was like, oh no, son, we're not art people. This is not going to happen. But he talked him into going in, and his father fell in love with it too. And they purchased this piece for his mother's present. And it was such a huge success. Then the next Christmas comes around, she gets another painting. Birthdays come around, another one, until her walls were filled, and she said, enough. I've got enough. But it wasn't enough for Roger. You know, Ida Kohlmeyer once said, "Collecting is a disease I hope never to be cured of." And Roger had caught the disease, and his collection is a testament of that. And he turned, over the course of his life, that same drive, that same focus that he brought to business, that he brought to his civic life, he turned to art of the American South. And that collection started initially with depictions of Louisiana and the Louisiana landscape, and it grew to encompass the entire South from El Paso to Baltimore. And so what I'd like to do is just go through and hit some of the major genres within his collection. There's no way to go through all the subgenres and themes within his collection in the time allotted, but I'd like to start with the earliest Louisiana portraiture and just give you a fine example from his collection, and then we'll talk about the museum. So this first piece is by the great American portrait painter Thomas Sully. Portrait painting was the first major art movement in the state of Louisiana. Painters came from Europe to paint for the planter class in New Orleans during the social season. It was their main source of income. Landscapes were happening, but portrait painting was where the money is at, and that's what brought people to the state of Louisiana from Europe. And then, of course, Louisiana artists were being trained in Europe and being trained right here in the French Quarter and in Louisiana. But Thomas Sully was the premier portrait painter of his time in American art in the mid-19th century. And this was commissioned by Mr. James Robb. Now, Mr. James Robb was originally from Ohio, but had come to New Orleans and founded the New Orleans Gas and Electric Company. And with that money that he made from that, he built one of America's first great art collection, and he housed it in a grand home on St. Charles Avenue. So let's think about that. Entrepreneur, family man, art collector that changed the visual landscape of the city of New Orleans. Sound familiar? I think it's very fitting that this is in Roger's collection, and this heroic in scale masterwork by Thomas Sully has so many parallels with Roger's life himself. But second genre, and this is where Roger's collection is unparalleled, I think, is the Bayou School in Southern Landscapes. And in the wake of the Civil War, three figures emerged from Louisiana: Richard Clay, Marshall Smith Jr., and William Buck, that defined a new landscape tradition wholly unique to South Louisiana. Rogers collected this genre deeply and with great connoisseurship, and his 19th century landscape collection also expanded to include European artists working in Louisiana and expanded across the South. And it includes stunning works by Joseph Meeker, and also by, I'm going to butcher this name, excuse me, but Regis Francois Gignot, but who was a French painter, born in France. He was a teacher of George Ennis, and he was of the Hudson River School. This is Sunset on the Dismal Swamp, and you can see it at the Hilliard Museum today. It's absolutely gorgeous. When Ben asked for it, I kind of cringed because I was like, oh, that's one of the best small gems in Roger's landscape collection, but it deserves to be seen in Lafayette because the connection to this place, this sense of place, is so strong. So I think if you haven't seen this show, go see it after this program today. But Southern art does not exist in a vacuum, though, and as new styles emerged across Europe and other New World centers, they also emerged in the South. And Impressionism found fertile ground in the artist studios in the South, from Virginia to New Orleans, but perhaps to no greater effect than the state of Texas. And just like the Bayou School of Landscape Painting emerged out of South Louisiana, the Blue Bonnet School of Impressionism emerged out of Texas, and the leader of that movement was Julian Onderdonk. And Roger has the very best Julian Onderdonks out there. This is one of the two greatest Julian Onderdonks I've ever seen. And I have to say, believe it or not, Laura Bush, former First Lady Laura Bush, is one of the greatest scholars of the Blue Bonnet School I've ever met. And she walked into the Ogden Museum when we had a Julian Onderdonk show, along with his father Robert Onderdonk, and other painters from this school, Salinas, and she knew everything. And Bluebonnet Scene with Girl, which is at the Ogden, just totally floored her. And I gave a presentation in Texas not too long ago where I called Bluebonnet Scene with Girl one of the greatest, Julian Onderdonk painting ever painted, and the great curator Michael Grauer, who is an expert in Onderdonk, agreed. This one is equal, I believe, and you can see it here at the Hilliard's exhibition, Bluebonnet and Huisac at Twilight. That's from 1920, oil on canvas. So almost concurrent with the rise of Impressionism in the South was the development of the arts and crafts tradition. And arising from the British Isles, this tradition quickly spread across the world. And the arts and craft movement exploded in New Orleans with the arrival of the brothers Woodward, Ellsworth and William Woodward, at Tulane and Newcomb, respectively. And Ellsworth, along with his brother William, actually founded the pottery program at Newcomb College. And this was a for-profit program where Joseph Myers and George Orr would throw the pots, and then the girls that attended Newcomb College would decorate it. And Roger's collection, I've never seen a better one. I mean, you go to his house and they're sitting around, in the oak den, but then you open up a French commode and the drawers are filled with Newcomb, I mean, it seems endless. I discover a new Newcomb pot every time I go. And by the way, I'm coming probably next week to look again. But not only did he collect, great examples of Newcomb pottery, these are well researched. He knows exactly, when they were made, who made them, and he's got lithographs and drawings of the designs from Newcomb Design to accompany it. But as the rise of modernist trends began to overtake Impressionism, newer modernist trends of Fauvism and Cubism and Symbolism, there's something happened in American art and American scene painting. It was a genre it was a new genre that arose in the 1930s in response to the Great Depression, and it was really America's first original art form. This didn't look to Europe for inspiration. This was an art form that was about what was happening in America, in an American landscape. It attempted to define an American style. It was a natural fit in the American South, and it exploded across the region. And one of the great centers for that was Dallas, and a group of artists called the Dallas Nine, which was really more like the Dallas 12, the Dallas 16, and because it also encompassed a circle of painters around those original 9 painters that were named. One of those painters is Florence McClung. I've seen a lot of Florence McClung paintings. She's one of my favorite Texas painters. This is by far the best Florence McClung I've ever seen. There are more valuable, there are more talked about, there are larger paintings, but this painting is absolutely gorgeous, and it is in Ben Hickey's finely curated exhibition at the Hilliard. But by the 1930s, photography, and I wish Richard was down here talking about photography because he knows way more about photography than I do. So sorry if I butcher this. It's Richard McCabe, curator of photography from the Ogden up there. But photography had established itself as an art form in American culture, and much like the painters of the regionalist and social realism genres, photographers reacted to the harsh realities of the Great Depression. Franklin Delano Roosevelt had established the controversial Farm Security Administration in 1937, and it was widely attacked as socialism in America. And so to defend this program and to let the American people know why we needed the Farm Security Administration, he started the FSA photography program. And just to defend those concepts. And so from 1935 to 1943, over 80,000 images were taken across the United States, but mostly in the American South. And it's interesting that not many of these photographers, I think maybe only one, came from the American South. But not only did that from that moment on, define how the world saw us, but it also defined how we saw ourselves in many ways. And so this is one of the greatest photographic documents in the history of mankind. And it's mostly focused on the American South. And Rogers collected heavily here. Here's one of my favorites, Marion Post Wolcott, resting from hoeing cotton on the Allen Plantation from 1940. Then we get to vernacular art. Now, Rogers collects it deep in vernacular art. And it just goes to show that Rogers' connoisseurship is not about names, it's not about value, it's about the quality of the work. It's not about the identity of the artist, it's about the quality of the work. And he's always sought to seek the very best examples of any given artist. Clementine Hunter is a fine example. This might be one of the most important Clementine Hunter, well, it is one of the most important Clementine Hunters ever painted, because we believe this is the very first Clementine Hunter that was ever painted. It's the right era, it's the right materials, it's on window shade, it's massive in scale. It depicts baptism in the Cane River community around Melrose Plantation, and it's also included in the Hilliard exhibition, so don't miss the opportunity to spend some time with this piece. This comes to another major inflection point in Rogers' collecting. By the 1980s, he had amassed a major collection. He knew it was important, but he had not delved into abstract art. It was focused morely on historic and more traditional forms, but on the occasion of an expansion of his house, he was building a new sunroom on his Georgian mansion in uptown New Orleans on Broadway, and he thought, wow, let's do something crazy. Let's put contemporary art in here, And so at the encouragement of his friend Arthur Roger, who was showing Ida Kohlmeyer at the time, he set up a meeting with Ida Kohlmeyer and commissioned this piece. It was good timing because Synthesis is just a masterpiece from Ida Kohlmeyer from 1983. And she'd reached a point in her career where she had fully developed this signature style of abstraction with this highly charged color on a white background, utilizing her own private language of pictographs and glyphs. I've never seen it leave the sunroom. I don't know what kind of sweet talking you did, Ben Hickey, but it is now at the Hilliard Museum of Southern Art. So please, of art. So please go by and see it. And that opened the doors then, opened the floodgates. Everything from the 18th century to now was Rogers' mission in collecting art of the American South. And here's a great example, Keith Saunier Split Dyad C from 1990. It's one of my favorite pieces in the Ogden Museum's collection. It's neon, mirror, glass, and aluminum. It's hard to experience this piece with a slide or a digital image, but it will be on view opening April 1st at the Ogden Museum. So if you want to see this fabulous piece, come and see it. By the way, I just discovered where the drawings are, the designs for this piece, and they have been offered to our collection. So those original drawings from Keith Saunier's studio will join this piece in the Ogden's collection.
Hey, Bradley.
Yep.
Dickie, didn't I say Dickie name?
Yeah, it was right there.
Yeah, right there, yeah. So Dickie, this is what I was talking to you about last night. So Dickie has a work in this exhibition as well. And I acquired Dickie's work, I think first, I'm not exactly sure. But this was a commission too. A commission to do this piece. And we split dyad. Dickie was telling me last night that 5 years he spent working with Keith inside. And he's although he didn't do a lot of two-dimensional work, you're painting with him as good as one of the first paintings. Yeah. But if you have a chance, remember this image. Let's say it at the audience. But see Dickie's work. It was right in the first gap. And you'll see these influence that the two had. And I was saying that there's nothing. One born in Mammoth, Keith, and one born, as you said, in Dickey. how appropriate that it should be here.
And two of a handful of giants that ever came out of Louisiana in American heart. Dickie Landry, you're always welcome at the Ogden, so please do come by. I did know that this was a commission, and that was reiterated when I saw these drawings that say Roger Ogden's piece at the top. So but you know, by the 1990s, now he's got a really, really important collection, and he realizes that this is something that needs to be shared with the world. And the first time that was really put on the radar, other than smaller shows, loans to other institutions, was the publication of Art in the American South, works from the Ogden collection, written and edited by Randolph Delahanty, which to me became a Bible. I try to snatch them up on eBay. It's long out of print. I try to get them when I can because I utilize this book so much. And I think that was the same for scholars across the region. You know, like William said earlier, there were no books on Southern art. And all of a sudden this arose. But they didn't stop there because Roger realized this was a collection that was too important just to stay in private hands, just to be his work or his family's work. That this work belonged to the people of Louisiana, belonged to the people of the South, and let's find a way to share it. So the concept was born of the Ogden Museum of Southern Art. So the Ogden Museum of Southern Art, we first started as a small gallery on Julia Street. As Roger and others were making plans, coordinating with the state of Louisiana, developing a partnership with University of New Orleans, trying to identify a campus. It may be apocryphal, but I heard originally it was going to be out on the lakefront. But then here comes a new museum called the D-Day Museum, which is now the National World War II Museum, which is now the number one reason people come to the city of New Orleans. And so we found a campus near the D-Day Museum. Lucky for, what's that? Oh, was it the reverse?
You should be proud, you and William and Greg. So, Greg first, Greg O'Brien, and then Chancellor of the Intermediate Site, the Florida site.
Yeah.
We always had, at the over 4 people from downtown and visitors coming out to see the PART1. So they first another house, you know, from there. And so it's finally got politely packed. When we came back, not very long after we had discussions with Pat Taylor and Brown, the Howard Museum, and for the Howard Library. If I can get Pat to give the Howard Library, we'll review the collection. And I said, Vega, it was not a tough negotiation.
Well, and the rest is history. What a beautiful campus.
So here, just so you know, the point you use the holder and the culture of it was that at the time, the D-Day, at the time we decided on this whole thing, it was all started by life. At that time, Stephen Ambrose, the father of the D-Day, wanted to build it on the site on the lakefront, as you will know, where the Higgins boats were tested, where we whatever test those boats that symbolize, and I said, won World War II for the Allies, those boats. D-Day and all of that, that was the name came from. So, Greg really wanted Stephen to put the World War II D-Day down here. And so we had had our side of it first up. And he had listened to go meet with Stephen and help him persuade Stephen to put the museum category to this site. Stephen, I use the same argument with him, but I had to and why I back in the late originally. And he bought into it because the missionary, walking distance from the center of the art museum, all of that. And we persuaded Stephen to do it. So we went first and showed you now the World War II Museum is the fourth PPE museum in the United States of America. And the primary reason for now is New York. They did an incredible job of promoting, developing, fundraising, and I don't know the total that they raised in the local $500 million. It's a really good thing happened. They cried a lot of Ryan came out about that. And so now they're the big guy on the block. And we're the little guy. I'm sorry.
No, please, Roger.
I just want you to know. And so anyway,
Sorry. So we were successful in persuading Stephen to locate it down in the museum district with us, and it has, as I said, I'm repeating myself, so that's it for the video. It's just become this hyper successful institution, and it picks up on the theme that has been part of, that Bradley knows and William knows, of putting the Ogden collection together, in that art represents the best of humankind and war represents the worst. Now, sometimes war is necessary, as World War II was ultimately necessary. It saved the world and saved democracy and freedom around the world. But you've got the best of humankind, our best side, and then you've got our worst side where we can't resolve our differences without coming to fisticuffs, you know, and they're catacomb to one another. I hope in time that we can promote that together with our brothers at the D-Day, and now we are figuring out how we can siphon off some of that great. What William? What are they up to now? Where's William?
He had to go to his daughter's birthday, so William had left.
Oh, that's way more important. But I believe I've got this right. I think they are up to close to half a million visitors a year, and we're at 85,000, which we think is fantastic. So anyway, it reversed, and then the fast horse took off, and we're trying to catch it.
Yeah, I wasn't here for the construction, so if I get something wrong, Roger, please jump in and correct me. But the firm of Barron and Toops was engaged to design Gold Ring Hall, which is our contemporary building attached to the 1889 Richardsonian Romanesque library, which you see depicted on the corner. And of course, Roger's career in development really helped speed the construction of this building along and helped make it one of the greatest exhibition spaces I've ever seen and worked in. And much like certain buildings by Renzo Piano, Mr. Barron's designs were built around the collection itself and in conjunction with the collector. That's a recipe for success, much like Cy Twombly building on the Menil's campus, you know. And even the certain walls were designed around certain pieces within Roger's collection, which I'll speak to a little bit later. So plans were laid, the construction began. Here's just a great photo of Roger in a hard hat. I just love that. And the Ogden Museum opened in 2023. You know, and you see in this picture that you see Benny Andrews at the end. Artists were involved from the very beginning. This was about the art and artist. And the Ogden opened with, and what I just discovered this photograph, and I didn't have time to, there's a couple of people I don't recognize, so Roger, you got to tell me. But what a great photograph from the grand opening of the Ogden Museum of Southern Art. You have Benny Andrews, Neen Humphreys, Kendall Shaw, the great William Christenberry, Bill Dunlap, Jeffrey Cook, don't recognize the next guy, but then there's Elmore Morgan right there in the center of this stairwell. Maudie and Langdon Clay, Gina Phillips, David Ray Morris, our former director, Rick Gruber, standing in front giving speeches on grand opening day. So the artists were the center of this conversation from day one. And the Ogden opened with the stated mission to broaden the knowledge, understanding, interpretation, and appreciation of the visual arts and culture of the American South. No museum had ever done that before. And it was founded on the donation of more than 600 works from Roger Houston Ogden's collection that is still the core, the heart of what we do. And it was that donation and Roger's vision that would help shape the future of the museum. And that mission is fulfilled every day in Goldring Hall, which is a 47,000 square foot glass and steel tower in the CBD. And in these slides, you see Jeffrey Cook, one of the artists from our permanent collection, was also a choreographer and a world-acclaimed dancer. And he choreographed a performance for grand opening that was performed in Goldring Hall that night. Jay Weigel, who was a conductor in New Orleans, who was also the former director of the Contemporary Arts Center, New Orleans, across the street, was commissioned to compose a new composition in celebration of the opening of the Ogden Museum of Southern Art. We have that sheet music in our collection in the vault today. And here he is conducting the members of the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra in Goldring Hall on opening night. And music has always been part of our mission. Literature, food, music, and as you see, grand opening weekend was filled with music. But then, just 6 days after our second anniversary, brand new institution, came Hurricane Katrina, and it struck just east of New Orleans on August 29, 2005, less than a week after the museum celebrated its anniversary. And the museum's collection, though, went largely unscathed. We were safe, and the campus was undamaged for the most part. But the museum suffered a drastically diminished staff, budget, and visitation in the wake of that storm. But despite all that, the Ogden was the first cultural institution in the city of New Orleans to open with programming in October, I believe it was October 27th, just a few short months after Hurricane Katrina. And we opened with a program of music that evening, and over 600 people, amidst all that devastation, it came to the Ogden Museum of Southern Art that night. I believe it was headlined by James Andrews. And those people came because they were seeking community. They were seeking culture, they were seeking healing, and they were seeking a sense of normalcy. And we recognized that at the museum, or David Houston, Rick Gruber, Roger Ogden recognized that and got the doors open and gave them a place of respite. And that cemented our place in the community at that moment as a community center, as a place for all people to be welcome, and we still feel that way today. Then, of course, came the pandemic in 2020. The museum was shuttered once again, and the staff quickly moved to an online presence and online programming. And even though I did it mostly from my living room, I think that was one of the busiest times of my life. And the board and Roger and the other members of the board protected the staff. We didn't lose a single member of our staff during this period, but we were closed for a while. And when we finally reopened in 2020, it was, again, with a drastically reduced budget and a drastically reduced attendance. But that was our third grand opening, and we survived. So where are we now? We survived Katrina, we survived the pandemic. We're doing pretty good. And recently, just in April of 2022, we got a major review in the New York Times, and the headline was, "Showcasing the Diversity of the South, Arising from One Man's Collection, the Ogden Museum strives to serve a broad audience while showing that Southern art is not merely regional." Mission accomplished. Within that article, our peers, Angie Dotson, the director of the Museum of Fine Arts in Montgomery, was quoted as saying, "They are the authoritative voice on Southern art, and they do these amazing exhibitions that are sweeping in scope and intimate in feel. They speak in an authentic voice, and they're about things that matter." This is the fulfillment of that vision that Roger had for the Ogden Museum, for this collection. So, exhibitions, we have, over the last 20 years, the Ogden Museum of Southern Art, starting with those small exhibitions on Julia Street, has mounted well over 400 exhibitions at this point. That's a lot of exhibitions, and I feel the burden of many of them, as does Richard McCabe, who's here with us today. But a lot of these exhibitions most of these exhibitions came from Roger's founding vision and discoveries that were made with this collection, like his focus on women in Southern abstraction. It became apparent to me, just getting to know the collection, that this was a major theme that needed to be explored further. And in 2018, we opened the whole Drum Will Sound, Women in Southern Abstraction. And there's other examples. The show we have on the walls right now by Gregory Saunders. This was an artist that was in the collection already with 2 fine examples. And that relationship built into the first major museum exhibition for this master of graphite from the American South. And the list could go on. I think of a Roland Freeman portfolio that Roger collected that's in the collection now, led to a solo exhibition that Richard curated. So his collecting practices, his vision with Southern art still continues to inform larger exhibitions within the museum. Education is at the core of the Ogden mission, and this too was a big part of Roger's original vision. From the start, and we've been a teaching institution, and the Ogden's collection has inspired students for over 20 years. The mission of the Ogden's Education Department is to create innovative programs designed to bring people together to explore the rich cultural identities of the American South. In 2019, 17,000 individuals, 16,928 individuals were reached through the educational programming at the museum. And that included 4,000 students in the building from Orleans and Jefferson Parish Public Schools alone. But one of the most inspiring programs and impactful programs in the education department is the teen docent program. And teen docents learn at the Ogden to lead tours of the museum. They serve as counselors for the summer camp. We have a very active summer camp program, and participate in outreach programs aimed at bringing art to children that are not able to visit the museum. They put together this great puppet show based on the collection at the museum, and they take this mobile puppet show to children's hospitals and places where the kids can't actually visit the museum. So this helps these teens build resumes. Right? This looks really good when they're applying to schools. And it also comes with a stipend. They get paid. And while the museum itself benefits from having formally trained summer assistants. And in 2015, this program received the National Arts and Humanities Youth Program Award, the nation's highest honor for out-of-school art programs. And our director of education at the time, Ellen Balkin, and one of our teen docents were able to travel to Washington, D.C. and accept this award from First Lady Michelle Obama. And so the collection, starting with the 600 pieces that Roger originally donated, over 600 pieces, has now grown to well over 4,000 pieces. We'll be approaching 5,000 objects within the next couple of years. And that people bring their treasures. People see the Ogden as a destination for the caretaking of these important works of art because of the power of Roger's vision and because of the power of Roger's collection. And so, you know, greatness draws greatness. And so I'd like to just briefly look at a few of the named larger collections that are important within the Ogden's collection. The Andrews Humphrey collection is over 250 works by a great American artist, Benny Andrews. And as I said, he was the founding artist member of our board, and he was the first artist in residence. And I think as America is having this moment of reckoning with black art, Benny Andrews is becoming more important every day. So this is a major collection, and this collection also has examples of works by his father, the dot man, George Andrews, a vernacular artist from Georgia, and his widow, Neen Humphreys. The Will Henry Stevens Collection. The Will Henry Stevens Collection is over 300 works by American artist Will Henry Stevens, who divided his time between New Orleans and the highlands of North Carolina, moving easily between plein air painting and non-objective abstraction, as you see here. The Joe Callenborn Collection is smaller in scale compared to the others, but equally as important. This is, Roger had already donated. Actually, Roger's piece is my favorite Minnie Evans I've ever seen from the founding donation, but that piece drew in this next collection of 20 works from Minnie Evans, making this the most important collection of Minnie Evans outside of the Cameron Art Museum in Wilmington, which was the beneficiary of her estate. And the Michael Brown and Linda Green Collection, which has 32 now works of art, including this great painting by Justin Forbes, Road Trip 1996, but also includes works by John T. Scott, Noel Rockmore, Jose Torres Tama, Robert Warrens, Fred Trenchard, and in process right now, our first Dawn Dodot. So that leads us to where we are now. What I'd like to finish with is our 20th anniversary exhibition titled Knowing Who We Are. This is going to draw heavily from Roger's collection and founding donation, but also include a kind of sweeping overview of what we've been doing with the collection since. And so this collection, Knowing Who We Are, will tell the story of the South through the collection, drawing inspiration from Ralph Ellison, who said, knowing where we are has a lot to do with our knowing who we are. And that goes back to that idea, that very first spark, that sense of place, and being a defining moment in the scholarship of Southern art since. Okay, let me see if I can figure this out. You want me to say no, right? Okay. But this is one of our signature images. This is Juanita Gonzalez, who was a potter at Newcomb, mainly known as a potter at Newcomb, member of the arts and crafts movement in the 20s, and she, as a single woman, had a studio down in the French Quarter in the 20s. That was unheard of. And she did the figure study of Frans Blom, who was a young Dutch archaeologist who was at Tulane University. He led the first expeditions into the Yucatan Peninsula to study the Olmec culture, and he obviously sat for Juanita in her French Quarter studio. This looks better now than it does in this slide because we just had it conserved, and it's just one of my favorite pieces in the collection. It's just a jewel that we found in Roger's donation. So following those themes set in Roger's collection, this exhibition will tread the same ground. On the third floor, opening April 1st and running through March of the following year, we will be looking at 19th century academic painting through Southern regionalism. Again, greatness draws greatness. The wonderful Ellsworth Woodwards and William Woodwards in our collection triggered the donation of this beautiful 1891 drawing by Ellsworth Woodward Tony that has just been framed for the first time and will be unveiled at the Ogden on April 1st. And we're going to borrow this beautiful painting from Roger. This is one of the masterpieces of his collection from one of the premier portrait painters of the 19th century, Jacquemont. We currently have a painting attributed to Jacquemont, but the provenance on this painting is very, very clear. This is Margaret from 1842. And Margaret was an Irish immigrant who came to New Orleans and suffered great tragedy, lost her entire family to scarlet fever, and with one cow started a dairy in the French Quarter that became extremely successful. And she, like Roger, felt the need to leave New Orleans better than she had found it and became one of Louisiana's first great philanthropists, starting an orphanage and giving to the children of the state and the city. This piece is heroic in scale. It's one of the masterpieces of Amon's career. And again, entrepreneur, philanthropist, changing the face of New Orleans. I think it's very fitting that this is in Roger Houston Ogden's collection as well. We will also have the Bayou School and the Southern Landscapes. So I believe we're going to have about 10 masterworks from Ogden's collection, only 2 of which we've shown before at the museum since I've been there. So it'll be a total redesign of these galleries, and this is one of the great examples. Joseph Meeker Bayou Plaquemines from 1881, just a stunning, stunning depiction of the Louisiana landscape. We're also going to have a still life gallery of 19th century to early 20th century still lives. A moment in the history of Southern art that we haven't explored in recent years, and including Emma Richardson Cherry's Untitled painting, still life from 1930. Emma Cherry is kind of known as the mother of modernism in the Houston art scene. And this is a beautiful example of her. It's actually the finest example of her work I've ever seen. And also exploring Impressionism, recently acquired works by Roger, which I cannot wait to get on the walls of the museum. It's so beautiful, is Dawson Watson's Tea on the Grass from 1915. And you see his direct ties to French Impressionism with this piece. And who better to represent the arts and crafts movement than Ellsworth Woodward, the founder of the Newcomb Pottery Program, with this beautiful watercolor on paper iris field near Newcomb Greenhouse in 1911. This is one of the most exciting acquisitions to me that Roger's made in several years, and this is Michael G. Owen's Leadbelly and the Artist from 1943. And again, we talked about Roger's connoisseurship. You know, there are bigger names in American regionalism and Southern regionalism, but Michael Owen is not very well known. But this heroic in scale, regionalist painting of Leadbelly, who the artist knew, who sat for drawings, and the artist and his family, Leadbelly and his family, is just one of the most exciting regionalist paintings that I've seen in many years, and we're really proud to be able to show it at the Ogden. But also in the atrium of the 3rd floor, we're going to showcase artists out leading into the galleries, contemporary artists who are either working in antiquated 19th century styles or who are inspired by that period. And one of those is Michael J. Dees. I call Michael the most famous artist you've never heard of. We did an exhibition of his work in 2012. It was his first museum show, and this is the man who's done 24 U.S. postage stamps, including Edgar Allan Poe, Tennessee Williams, George Bush, more recently Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But he also he designed and painted the logo for Columbia Pictures, the Torch Lady. But he had never had a museum show until the Ogden, and at that show, Roger saw the value of this Edgar Allan Poe painting and brought it into the collection, and this will be put in context with the great 19th century portrait painters in knowing who we are. On 4th floor, that exhibition, that floor of the museum will be dedicated to the rise of abstraction, photography, and vernacular art. And remember when I said certain walls of the Goldring Hall, certain walls of the building were built specifically for works of art? Well, this is one example right here. Sam Gilliam's drape work from 1970. The front wall of the entrance to the exhibition space on 4th floor was designed specifically for this piece, scaled for this piece. And I've hung it in a few different places, once or twice in the museum's history, but we're going to bring it back to the wall that it was designed for this exhibition and hang it there. Now, it's also interesting that before this moment of reckoning that the art world is having with black artists in the history of American art and equity in collecting, Roger was there collecting Sam Gilliam early on. Good thing, because he got it, I think, for a lot cheaper than it's worth right now. But this is one of the great pieces of Sam Gilliam, which museums all thirst for a good Sam Gilliam from this era, and we have one. And he built a relationship with Sam. Sam came to Roger's house to hang this piece after Roger purchased it. And it's those photographs of Gilliam's hang of this work that we still work from meticulously today to make sure we get every fold of the fabric done properly and with Sam's vision. Sam Gilliam, of course, was from Mississippi, Tupelo, Mississippi, but was one of the leading figures in the DC color field movement. But also in that idea of Roger collecting kind of lesser known artists and artists that have been overlooked in the history of art. You have Bess Dawson, a member of a group of 3 women from rural Summit, Mississippi, who were doing this fabulous abstraction in the mid-50s. You know, I don't think a lot of people in rural Mississippi were doing abstract, you know, just really successful abstract expressionist paintings. But these 3 women would make annual trips to New York City, see what was going on in the art world, and go back to Summit, Mississippi, and just create these beautiful, beautiful paintings. Bess Dawson, Halcyon Barnes, Ruth Atkinson Holmes. There's a beautiful Bess Dawson in Ben's exhibition at the Hilliard, and this is the Bess Dawson that we will be showing in 2023. And the other members of the Summit group will be represented as well. And then Sherry Owens from Dallas, contemporary artist, working predominantly in crepe myrtle. You heard that right. She works mainly in crepe myrtle as an abstract sculptor. This is a very large piece. I didn't put the dims on, but it's almost as tall as I am and really heavy. Mother Nature throwing up her hands. And I included her in the Whole Drum Will Sound, Women in Southern Abstraction, and Roger saw the significance of the work and the significance of that moment for her at the Ogden Museum, because even though she's from Dallas, which is very close to Lake Bistineau, and the great Clyde Connell, who's in the exhibition here at the Hilliard, is from Lake Bistineau, and Sherry Owens sat at the feet of Clyde Connell and learned about art, and it was her great mentor. No text, and Sherry's shown at every state-funded Texas museum, every single one of them. But no museum had ever put them together in an exhibition until the Ogden. And Roger saw that connection and that influence and saw the importance of this piece and helped bring us into the collection. Can't thank you enough for that, for all of these, actually. And of course, Fritz Bultmann, one of the giants of Louisiana art, the missing irascible. This is from 1941, Action Mass Still Life 2. And there's a beautiful Fritz Bultmann in the Hilliard show as well. I think I mentioned the Roland Freeman exhibition earlier that Richard McCabe curated. This is Peter, East Baltimore, Maryland, 1969. There will be a large selections of contemporary art, contemporary photography on the 4th floor. We were just going to blend everything, and photography is blended into the 3rd floor exhibition. It's blended into the 5th floor exhibition. The same with vernacular art, but we thought we would have a moment to really celebrate the photography collection alone, and that's going to be on the 4th floor of this exhibition, as well as the vernacular collection as well. George Deroe, Troy Joshua Brown from 1985, one of the finest examples of George Deroe's work. And David Emmett Adams, Valero Bill Gree Refinery No. 1 from Corpus Christi, Texas, 2018. This was an artist that Richard included in an exhibition called New Southern Photography, and Roger saw the value of the work and brought 2 of these really innovative, really important photographs. It's a wet collodion on a 55-gallon drum lid. So he went across the South taking pictures of refineries and actually printing them, or taking, actually, this is a single object, right, Richard? This is, yeah, so he actually photographs it onto these 55-gallon barrel lids. And our vernacular art collection, I've seen a lot of Bessie Harvey sculptures, and she's one of my favorite vernacular artists ever to come out of the American South. This is absolutely the finest Bessie Harvey sculpture I've ever seen. Chariot Ride, 1991. And again, among the best Howard Finsters I've ever seen, World of the Happy and Free, 1996. Moving to 5th floor, and I'm almost done, guys, I promise. Moving to 5th floor, the 5th floor will be what we're calling the contemporary dialogue. So this will be works from the latter part of the 20th century that are works that actively inspire, that are actively involved in the contemporary dialogue, whether they might be 40 years old, inspiring future artists, or whether they're being artists that are actively working today. Douglas Bourgeois' Giant Horse, of course, I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with the great Douglas Bourgeois. This is one of my favorite Douglas Bourgeois I've ever seen. We have several in the collection, but this is my favorite. It's a commentary on the art world. Oh, need to update this computer. and that'll join objects like Horton Humboldt's scattered site. Horton Humboldt is a native son of the Treme neighborhood, the neighborhood I live in, who's a member of the Level Artist Collective, which is a group of a collective that has 5 artists of color, younger artists of color in the city of New Orleans. And this was a piece that Roger recently helped bring into the Ogden's collection from 2017. And this is my last slide of art. Rommel Ross's I Home. It has become a signature image for us. This is the image that the New York Times had started their article with. And it says a lot about the role of art and museums and looking to the past, facing our past and reconciling it with the future. This is an artist who is working in Hale County, Alabama, like the great William Christenberry, and we were able to make that connection with Richard, leading that charge at the Ogden Museum of Southern Art, and Pace in New York, Pace Gallery in New York, one of the biggest galleries in the world, is currently making that same connection on the walls of their gallery. So it's just a great example of how the Ogden Museum of Southern Art is leading this conversation into the future, exploring exactly who we are, and where we are as a result. And just like knowing where we are has a lot to, with our knowing who we are, knowing where we came from has a lot of knowing who we are. And where we came from was one man's vision, Roger Houston Ogden. And I'm so proud to be able to celebrate you here in Lafayette, the city of your boyhood. And thank you for everything you've done for the arts and culture of the American South and Louisiana in particular. And that's it for me.